So today we are gonna review research methodology and organizational culture. Of course, in organizational culture, not all the theories are important. We're gonna concentrate on the main assumption or main theories for organizational culture. Starting from definition of the organizational culture, which is the collective programming of the mind that distinguish the members of one group or category of people from another. So the organizational culture is the way the employees perceive what happened in their organizational environment. These are some of the definition of the culture or organizational culture, the collective norms, beliefs, behaviors inside the organizational environment, and the difference between weak culture and strong culture. The strong culture value widely shared between the employees, and in the weak culture, the values are limited for the few employees, usually the top managers. Culture conveys consistent message about what's important. So there's a consistent message. In the weak, there's contradictory message, of course. Most employees can tell stories about company's history. In a strong culture, they memorize the histories or the stories related to the organizational history. Employees have little knowledge of company histories or heroes. They don't have any clues about the past of the organizations. Employees strongly identify with culture. Employees have little identification with culture. A strong connection between shared values and behavior. Here, there is little connection between the shared values and behavior. So values widely shared, limited, and consistent, contradictory message. Tell stories and memorize the story of the organization. Employees have little knowledge. Strongly identify with culture. The link between employees and culture are weak, and the strong connection between shared values and behavior. Little connection between shared values and behavior. The strong and weak culture. Theories of organizational culture. As we mentioned earlier, we were going to concentrate in Hofstede, Globe, Edgar Chain, Quinn and Cameron, competing value framework model, type of organizational culture offered by Roger Harrison and Handy's model of organizational culture. The other are some general topics regarding organizational culture. The Hofstede 6 dimension. He analyzed the culture of too many companies and organizations all over the world, and he came up with the 6 dimension to identify or classify the culture among all the surveyed companies. I think more than 100 companies or 1,000 companies, something like that. He classified 6 dimensions. The first dimension is the power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity, femininity, uncertainty, avoidance, long and short-term orientation, intelligence versus restraint. So the power distance, less powerful people accept and expect the power distributed unequally. So in this culture, the worker level or the blue collar level or something like that do not expect that the power will be distributed equally among the organization. They accept and expect that the power, some people of the organization will have more power than the others. The distribution of power inside the organization. So this dimension is related to the distribution of power inside the organization, not equal distribution or equal distribution of power. Power distance is high in East European, Latin, Asia, and Africa, lower in European and English speaking countries. So the culture of the Middle Eastern or Asian or African organization emphasizes the power distance. There's big gap in power inside the organization, while the opposite happened in Europe and USA and English speaking countries. Power distance, strong sense of position status implicate high power distance. The national culture accept and encourage bureaucracy and high respect of authority. Subordinate expect to be told what to do with high possibility of corruption and uneven income distribution. This happen, the characteristic when we have strong power distance or big divided hierarchy is called. In the lower power distance, it means that we have flatter organization. We have structure that emphasis on personal responsibility and delegation. We have decentralized structure, subordinate accept to be consulted with low corruption rate and equal distribution of income. So these are the difference between the organization with a strong power distance and low power distance. So the main concept for power distance is distribution of power, unequal distribution, weak power distance characteristic, and the strong power distance characteristics. For the uncertainty avoidance, we have two types of organization culture regarding uncertainty. The first one, that organization do not tolerate uncertainty and ambiguity in the environment. And strong uncertainty avoidance. Uncertainties in life must be fought because it's considered as continuous threat with lower score in subjective health and well-being, with need for clarity and structure, staying in job even if you dislike. These are the characteristics of the organization that avoid uncertainty and try to work in a stable environment and ignore all the ambiguity in the environment. So we have organization with a strong uncertainty avoidance and organizations with weak uncertainty avoidance. They talk the ambiguity or instability in the environment with as it comes. They value subjective health and well-being. They are comfortable with ambiguity and chaos and dislike written and unwritten rules. So they are not working with the strict procedures, rules, and behavior. They like uncertainty and welcome it, and they consider it as opportunity, or they can deal with it easily. So the main concept, whether to avoid uncertainty or accept uncertainty and chaos. Of course, the difference between the organization regarding this aspect, uncertainty avoidance. Individualism versus collectivism, whether the decision making come from someone, individual top manager, and force the other to follow his rule and his decision, or it's a collective sharing of decision making inside the organization. So individualism, everyone expects to look after him or herself, not the group. The consequences, not we, but we, with personal opinion presented with task, reveals our relationship. So this is the culture when each member and the organization consider itself only, not thinking as a group. Collectivism, the sense that you born with a family that provide the protection within the group. So more consideration for the group and the interaction with the group. Opinion are voted and determined within the group. Purpose of education is to learn how to do, not just learning. This is the assumption of the individualism and collectivism culture. The culture that emphasizes individualism and the culture that emphasizes collectivism. Working individual or working with any group. Masculinity versus femininity. It's related to decision making style, whether it's consultative, feminine, or aggressive decision making style, which is masculine. Balance between family and work, feminine. Work prevails over family, masculine. So it's related more to decision making, whether it's collaborative, cooperative decision making, taking the consultation of the group. This is the feminine decision making, or that is aggressive come from one side. Maybe I mix between individualism and this one. The decision-making related aspect is masculinity and femininity.
Individualism and collectivism, I think it's about the relationships among people.
Yes.
Collectivism, as you said, they care more about the group, they cooperate. So like the members of the organization are considered like they consider each other as a family, while individualism, as we see, for example, in the United States, they're an individualistic society, so they keep their distance. Everyone thinks about their they do everything individually. They care about their own benefits, let's say. So there isn't, for everyone cares about themselves.
Yes.
I wouldn't care like about the benefits of the whole group.
Just what's in it for me, not what in it for the group. You know?
Exactly.
The masculinity, femininity is related to this decision-making approach, whether it's collaborative or individual or strict decision or progressive decision making process.
And also in masculinity also they resemble how can I say it, they're more assertive and they strive to be successful, and they also always have high achievements that they want to reach to. So this is their main goal, main objective, is that we have higher achievements. We always want to be successful. This is what characterizes a masculine culture.
Masculine, and the feminine culture is the opposite, or what?
As you mentioned here, the feminine. It's more like caring, and it's about affection and these things.
So is masculine approach related to I want to achieve more and I want to, in spite of others or in spite of thinking of other, I just want to make achievement without looking for the others. Yes.
They're more assertive, yeah.
The feminine approach is let's do it together or achieve things together. You know?
Yes.
Long-term versus short-term, whether you are thinking, the organization think for long-term plan or long-term horizon or short-term horizon. So the time horizon for decision-making, whether it's related to long-term effect of decision-making or for the moment in hand. Some organizations just concentrate in the moment of hand and take decision accordingly. Other organization, when it take decisions, it's look for the future and the longer term of time. Intelligence versus restraint is related to how strict the organization or how it's agile or resilience in its operation. So intelligence, how flexibility inside the organization. Intelligence people enjoy life and have fun with life control, and they foster higher education. Restrain, they live a stressful life and live under pressure all the time, and leisure or freedom for speech is not the primary concern in this in restrained culture or in restrained perspective.
Like restraining cultures, for example, like Middle Eastern cultures.
Middle Eastern cultures. Most of the divisions related to whether Middle Eastern, Asian, and the contradict in Europe and USA. Yes. So these are the 6 aspects of Hofstede culture dimension or culture theory: power distance, uncertainty avoidance, individualism, collectivism, masculinity, femininity, long-term versus short-term, intelligence versus restraint. The dimension of organizational culture process-oriented versus result-oriented, whether the culture concentrate on the process or concentrate on the result, whether the culture concentrate on jobs, looking for how employees perform the job only, with employee-oriented culture more concerned about the employees' well-being. So whether you consider the job is more important than the employees, or the employees somehow need to be taken care of, part of the culture, not the choice of individual manager. Professional versus parochial, from individual expertise or from organizations they work for. So you are looking for yourself as a professional, and what you gain is your expertise. You didn't link between your identity and the organization identity. You separate yourself from the organization and you define yourself based on your experience. Proactual, you define yourself based on the organization you work in. So there's a link between you and the organization. Open system with closed system. So it's related to communication, whether the communication inside the organization it's open or closed. So it's related to the style of organization, of communication inside the organization.
I think also it's related to how open the organization is to external environment.
Tight with loose control, whether the control inside the organization is very tight, with high degree of formality and punctuality. Like if you have loose control, the example here is the bank. Banks uses tight control, and as example, advertisement agency uses loose control. So this is the difference between loose and tight control. Pragmatic, flexible versus normative, rigid. So is it the degree of customer orientation, whether it's flexible, like on sales, pragmatic versus rigid style with customers, normative. So it's related to how you deal with customers or your customer orientation, whether it's flexible, complies with customer needs, and you can be flexible with customer, or you have normative, rigid style of with customer. Hofstede culture and personality relation. The link between Hofstede and the personality, the 5 personality factor: neuroticism, extraversion, openness to experience, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. So I think it's related here to if you use the type of culture you use based on your personality, the personality of individual, and their rate on personality, 5 personality relation will affect the type of culture they follow or they use. So this is for Hofstede, 6 dimension for culture: power, distance, uncertainty, individual, masculinity, long-term intelligence, and the dimension of the culture, which is professional or parochial. Open system or closed, tight, loose, pragmatic, normative, and so on. Any addition from your side?
No.
Okay. The second one is the GLOBE. GLOBE project expand Hofstede dimension to 9. The same as Hofstede dimension, but it expanded from 6 to 9. Collectivism, separate collectivism into 2 different aspects: in the institutional collectivism or any group collectivism, masculinity, femininity, assertiveness, and gender egalitarianism.
Equality, I'm not going to use this word. Gender equality is easier.
Gender equality. Added a human
they
orientation.
added 2 dimensions, yeah.
Added 2 dimension, human orientation and performance orientation. So
also in terms of in the Hofstede dimensions, they mentioned the long-term and short-term. In the GLOBE, it's the future orientation.
Equality. And what
In the globe, it's future. They use it as a future orientation, but in the Hofstede, it corresponds to long term and short term. Yeah, future orientation. And then the rest they are the same: power, distance, uncertainty, avoidance.
this is the difference between Hofstede and our the extension for Hofstede 6 dimension, collectivism into institutional, any group, masculinity, femininity, assertiveness, and gender equity, the human orientation, performance orientation, and they change the time horizon for the future orientation.
Uncertainty, avoidance, and power, distance. So this makes 9.
Unity, avoidance, and power distance. One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Actually, assertiveness also 9.
Assertiveness.
You already wrote it here.
I guess it's
Yeah.
assertiveness. Okay. So the third theory for organizational culture, and one of the famous, is Edgar Schein, 1984, who classified the culture into 3 levels.
Like an iceberg.
Like an iceberg, yes. Pattern of basic assumption that give a group has invented, discovered, developed, and leading to cope with its problem, and that have worked well enough to be considered as valid. So it's supposed to be taught to new members as the correct way to perceive things and feel in relation to those problems. This the definition of culture based on Edgar Schein, I think. It's a pattern of basic assumption given to the group, how do they solve a problem, and how they work well enough, and this assumption worked well enough to be considered as valid, and they're supposed to taught it for the new members inside the organization. He classified the culture inside the organization to 3 levels of culture. The first level is the one appear above the ocean. It's what you saw in the first time when you visit the organization. Like behavioral explicit level, it's a behavioral or explicit level, what you'll notice first time when you visit the organization. So the first time you visit an organization, you can notice some part of the culture, or the appearing part of the culture, like the language they use, the communication style inside the organization, the food, the rituals, the architecture, and the colors. So these are the basics, or that's the appearing parts of the culture, what you notice at the first time. Artifacts and visible service elements of organizational culture, like branding, dress codes, furniture, colors, day-to-day rituals and job titles, stories, what people tells about their organization. So these are the artifacts, the first level of the organization culture. The second level organization culture, it's norms and values. The norms and values lies in the second level of the iceberg. Norms like rules of society determining what good or bad, norms and behavior that expected from their members. It is the norm and behavior that expected from the organizational member, and what should be done and how should we do it, and what the choice we gonna make. How members of organization interact, behave, and represent their organization, the way the employee represent their organization based on their norms and beliefs of the organizations. The value.
And normally you can see it, you can even see some businesses online in their website, they state their core values. So it's announced to everyone that these are their core values.
Yes, of course, it's part of the strategy formulation. You set your vision, mission, and values
Values.
also. So I think maybe we can, or they can, or Edgar Schein can put the values
Can
with the
change.
first level, with the first level,
You can
because
propose that to him if he's still living.
he's still living.
Yes, yeah.
Uh, because it's the appearance part. Based on his definition, the values is spread everywhere, so you can see it in the website. But maybe the organization values that presented in its website is just the ideal values that the organization hope to reach from. But in reality, they comply or not comply with these values. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
So he talked about the actual values that followed inside the organization, not the announced value using organization website or something like that. So maybe in this case, we can keep it here in the second level. So the values represent what's important inside for the organization and what's not important and what's right and what's wrong. The right and wrong behavior that the organization need to
it guides
follow or to avoid.
Yeah, so these are the values that guide their behavior, we can say.
Yes, of course. The values that guide the behavior, maybe it will be different than the values announced, as I mentioned earlier. The third level is innermost layer. It's the core of culture, which contains the assumptions and beliefs. It's the assumption and belief that taking for granted inside the organization, and it's very difficult to explain why its existence. It's deeply rooted inside the history of the organization. You cannot explain it or tell anyone why it's there. It's just
It
there.
differs. Yeah, it differs from organization to another.
Yes. The assumption we are talking about in the third level is the truth, the time, the space, the human nature, the relationship between organization member and environment, and the social power. So the assumption about the truth, the organization assumption about the truth and the nature of the truth, the assumption about the time and its importance, and the space it work inside it, the organization, and the human nature, all its assumption about the different aspects formulate the innermost layer of the organization culture, the third level of the organization culture. As we mentioned, it's the deeply rooted and cannot be explained. So here for Edgar Schein, the three level of culture. He put the theory in 1984, so it's somehow
he's still alive.
Still alive. It's a new one. Any addition from your side for Edgar Schein?
No, that's all.
So organizational change and culture relations, another topic, short topic, middle manager as barrier to the successful implementation of such initiative. Agent not the target of a change. In this topic, he saw that most of the time the middle manager who were responsible for avoiding or restricting the change inside the organization. And if you want to successfully implement the change inside the organization, you need to start with the middle manager. I don't know what the relation between this and maybe if you want to change the culture of the organization, hey, you need to start with the middle manager or something like that. Myths and organizational culture. The myth is a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people or explaining a natural or social phenomena, and typically involving supernatural beings or events. This is the traditional stories told about the organization and how the employees, whether they are knowing these stories or telling these stories or not. It is the legitimizing and rationalizing action that intended moderating political interest and value system, explaining and creating causes and effect, create environment where turbulence and complexity are buffered through rationalization, methods making useful and healthy function in enriching human interaction. So the stories about the organization, the old heroes of the organization, if it's there and it's spread widely, it legitimizes and rationalize action inside the organization. It's moderating more political interest and value system. It explain and create causes and effect, explain what happened or what should be done or something like that, creating environment of that the turbulence and complexity can be buffered or rationalized, admit making useful and healthy function in enriching a human interaction. This is the methods about the organization. Good to know. Culture and subculture. Here's talking that in each organization you have the main culture that appears and spread inside the organization, and because of that each organization contain individuals and lots of employees, maybe some subculture will exist inside the organization, and the existence of subculture may benefit the organization through setting boundaries, create room for innovation. So if the main culture of the organization is strict or follow the rules and regulation, and some subculture valued innovation, so you might have some area of innovation that can be done through this subculture, the existence of subculture, and there's room for creative ideas. So there's what the meaning of culture and subculture. You are talking, the culture is the organization culture, subculture that can be formed with the individual and the group working inside the organization. Stories, I think it's like methods, whether it's positive or negative stories. Positive stories will enhance the organization legitimacy in the society and improve employee behavior, and negative story will do the opposite. How the ideologies are manifested. Coherent set of beliefs that bind people together and explain the cause and effect relationship. That's not very important. How the ideologies manifested inside the organization. The other important theory regarding organizational culture is the Quinn and Cameron's competing value framework model. Quinn and Cameron competing value, he defined 4 competing values. The first one is inward, and the opposite of it's outward focus, and the flexibility focus or stability focus. And based on that, the organization lies within 4 types of culture, as Quinn and Cameron proposed. If the organization are toward stability and focus, have inward focus, internal operation focus, then we have hierarchy culture, inward looking and focus on control, hierarchies, values, efficiency, process, control, structure, order, and smooth and predictable operation of business. So it's like mostly the governmental organization culture or the public organization. They focus on stability and they focus internally, not very aware of the external environment, maybe. They focus, if they have a flexibility and focus on internal process or internal organization system, we have a clan culture. Inward looking and the flexible clan value teamwork. In this culture, they value teamwork and collaboration and are close knit and supportive to each other as they respond to the world. So the clan قبيلة يعني إنه نتعاون مع بعض وندير بالنا على بعض. Market, when you are working in a stable, you want stability and you focus outward. So outward looking and focus on stability and control. Market organization are outcome and action driven, focus on competing and winning, and very market achievement oriented. When the organization working in a very competitive environment and need to establish its existence or reinforce its existence in the market, So they need stability and with outward focus, the market culture, they follow the market culture. The adhocracy culture, it's outward focus with the flexibility. Adhocracy are fast-paced, dynamics, and entrepreneurial. The innovative culture take risk, aim to grow, and are dynamic in their effort. Is the characteristic of adhocracy culture. He make a survey for 12,000 companies worldwide, and he found that the flexible organization are more successful than the rigid one. Of course, you don't need 12,000 companies to be surveyed in order to come up with this result. Okay, this is for a Quinn and Cameron competing values framework model. Industry determinant of organization culture somehow related to institutional theory. When the industry you work in force you to follow a specific culture, So organization culture is strongly influenced by the characteristic of the industry in which company operate in which the company or industry you operate, you might follow the culture that followed by others. Share some cultural element that required for survival, competitive environment, customer requirements, social expectation, industry influence for a change. So you follow the rules and the culture that followed by the organization working in the same industry. You have assumption about competitiveness, customer requirement, and social expectation. Competitiveness, highly dynamic and competitive industry. If your industry is very competitive, you force flexible, adaptable culture. You foster a change and innovation. Your product development and high customer care deals with uncertainty created by competitors. Decentralized structure close to the market and flexible to deal with the change. So if you're working in a very competitive environment, you most likely follow the following characteristic or follow this type of culture: flexible, foster a change and innovation, product development, customer care. It deals with uncertainty and have decentralized structure. If the industry you are working with has higher customer requirements, so if the customers in this industry have higher requirement or higher needs, higher expectation from the companies working in this industry, so you emphasis on your novelty and reliability, highly dynamic, novel, or very static, reliable. So based on the customer requirement, you modify your culture. Social expectation, the effect of society on organizational culture. The changing rule of society might affect the direction of organization culture and how it acts. The society perspective about the values that need to be adopted by the organization. Here, if you're working in some areas with social expectation from the organizations, so you need to adapt your culture based on the social expectation. So whether you adapt your culture based on competitiveness, based on customer requirement, or based on social expectation. Here about industry determinant of organizational culture. The role of culture in organization. The role of culture inside the organization. Venture outcome. Culture determine the venture outcome. The organization must understand the culture and subculture before attempting to change it. The driving force of a change are invariably counterbalanced or overwhelmed by the restraining force inherited in the existing culture. These must be identified. General rules are not that important. Harrison and Roger. Actually, in the summary, they put it like this, but this one is for handy.
Yeah, this is Handy's.
Handy model.
Hmm.
Mm, maybe
There
rather
is Deal and Kennedy, types of culture according to Deal and Kennedy,
Deal and Kennedy.
which is the macho tough guy, the bet your company, the process, and the work hard, pay hard culture.
Can you write it
Because-
in the chat box?
Wait a second. I sent it.
The macho tough guy culture, the best your company culture, the process culture, the work hard, pay hard culture.
These cultures, they resemble the high risk-taking industries, and which it compares it according to the high risk-taking or low risk-taking, and the other dimension is high risk. According to the feedback, how fast they get feedback, or if it's a slow feedback. For example, the macho tough guy culture, it's considered as a high risk taking culture.
Macho.
Yes, the macho, high risk taking, and they get also fast feedback.
Mhm. This one,
What? I can't see.
tough guy,
Yes,
work hard, process
yes,
culture, fit your
yeah,
company culture.
yeah. The tough guy, they are high risk takers, they are achievers, and they get feedback very fast. For example, like advertisement agencies or entertainment industry.
Mhm.
And then we have the work hard, play hard culture. They get feedback very fast, but they are low risk takers. For example, fast food chain restaurants like McDonald's, the feedback is very fast, but there is a low risk.
Mhm.
They don't take high risks. The bet your company culture, it's a high risk but slow feedback.
Mhm.
This is an example of, for example, aircraft industry or the pharmaceutical industry. They get feedback very slow, but it's a high risk industry.
Mhm.
And the process culture, they're not high risk takers. The risk is low and the feedback is also slow. Example of this is insurance companies, for example, or banks.
Mhm. Slow feedback in the banks.
When I've been searching for them for some examples, they mentioned banks.
Mhm. Nice. Okay, this is for Dean and Candy types of culture.
Mhm.
Fit your company, process, work hard, or tough guy. Okay. Culture and subculture, we already dictionary. This is not important also. There's this one.
And Handy's types of culture, as you have mentioned. So I think you
Now
should correct it.
yes. Handy. Where are we? Handy, he divides the culture
Yeah.
into power, task, rule, and person. The power culture, there are some organizations where the power remains in the hand of only few people and only they are authorized to take decision. They are the one who enjoy special privilege at the workplace. They are the most important people at the workplace and are the major decision maker. The individual further delegate responsibility to other employees. In such culture, the subordinate have no option but to strictly follow the rules of their supervisor and their instruction. The employees do not have liberty to express their views. It's like the one explain it like high power distance or something like that. It's the same power in the hand of you. Follow the rules and restriction. Followers do not have rooms for innovation or doing their what they want. They just follow strictly the rules and regulation imposed to them from the people from the above. Rule culture. The rule culture is the culture where every employee is delegated rules and responsibilities according to his specialization, educational qualification, and interest to extract the best out of him. In such culture, employees decide what best they can do and willingly accept the challenges. Every individual is accountable for something or the other and has to take ownership of the work assigned to him. Power comes with responsibility in such work culture. So you delegate the responsibilities to others based on their qualification and education and their position inside the organization. The task culture, power within the team, whether it's matrix or join around subject, organization where teams are formed to achieve the target or solve critical problems, follow the task culture. So if you project-oriented organization, you work in a project or something like that, you follow the team or the task culture. Individuals with common interests or specialization come together to form a team. There are generally 4 to 5 members in each team. In such a culture, every team member has to contribute equally and accomplish tasks in the most innovative way. This we can find it in the matrix structure when you form team to accomplish specific project or something like that. A person culture, a collection of individuals working together. There are a certain organization where the employees feel that they are more important than their organization. Such organization follow a culture known as person culture. When person inside the organization is more think themselves that they're more important than the organization.
They're more valuable, yeah.
In person culture, individuals are more concerned about their own self rather than the organization. The organization in such culture take back seat and eventually suffer. Employees just come to the office for the sake of money and never get attached to it. They are seldom loyal toward the management and they never decide in favor of the organization. One should always remember that organization comes first and everything else later. So it's more personally oriented, taking care of individual need and not taking care of the organization, or employees just came to the organization just for spending time, making limited work and then get paid and so on, just that. So we have person, task, rule, and power, the 4 types of culture proposed by Handy's. What was that? So the power culture can be represented in this just one in the middle, control all the power and then order the others to do as he wish. The rule, when you have division and delegate the power to others based on their qualification, education, and position inside the organization. Autocratic or paternalistic. Task culture is paternalistic or democratic. And person culture. I don't know what they call it, democratic.
The person, as far as I understand, and I took notes about the person culture, it's actually not the people themselves. They consider themselves as more valuable than the organization itself, but the organization sees people as a valuable, as we can say, like the human capital. So they consider a person as an important asset to the organization and very valuable. And it's like horizontal structure. They have a horizontal structure where everyone gets to have a say, or they are involved in decision making. And so
I read about it. I think it's more related, as example, when you have movie star and lots of people around him serving him or do something for him. The individual in this form of this structure is the most important, not the organization itself. Like as example, Messi in Barcelona, you know, all the team, all the organization are serving one player because he's very important, more important even than the organization itself. So all the resources inside the organization dedicated for this one individual. Actually, I read this and I read this statement also. Maybe we can combine the two. When this is when individual, when the person is more important than the organization. So here's the individual. Maybe it's the big circle and everyone inside the circle serving this individual person. This. Okay. Dean and Kennedy types of culture. You said about it. I will explain it. Okay, this is conclude the organizational culture, and here's some YouTube video, 1 hour video, explain organization culture. If you want to review it, you have time to review it. So once again, Hofstede 6 dimension globe that extended Hofstede 6 to 9. Edgar Schein, the 3 level of cultures, the culture that looks like iceberg, first level, second level, and third level. Quinn and Cameron, competing value framework, inward focus, outward focus, is stability or flexibility. Types of organization by Roger Harrison. It's handy actually. Power, role, task, and person. And Dean and Kennedy types of culture: fit your company, process, tough guy, and work hard. Okay.
Okay.
This is for organizational culture. So for research methodology.
Yes.
Research methodology. I think actually there is no just collecting of topics related to research methodology. I didn't organize it because we took it with Nergul Hoja, different, like Ufuk, different.
Did you take it with me as well, with Nergul Hoja?
Yes, with Nergul Hoja.
Yeah, basically that's where I studied from.
Yes, but before that I took it with Ufuk, and he mentioned the research onion formulated by Sanders, because we study the book of Sanders for research methodology. And he exemplified the research as onion with different layers. So you go, when you do the research, you go from the upper layer to the inner layer. So the most upper layer is the philosophies. So you choose your philosophical approach during the research, whether you value the positivism, the realism, the interpretivism, or the pragmatism.
I only know positivism.
Positivism. Positivism is
using scientific, obtaining knowledge by applying scientific methods.
It's like doing experiment inside the labs or It's a little more
Using quantitative ways.
quantitative approach and emphasize the existence of one reality.
Mhm.
Realism, it's we have I think constructive realism, or two parts. One part is related to positivism, somehow connected to positivism, the existence of one reality, and the other part is more subjective and the multiple reality approach. Interrelativism, there's the multiple reality, the existence of multiple reality.
I don't
Pragmatism,
really understand when they speak about more than one realities when they're questioning these things.
you can because they didn't link it with the example, but in Sanders' book as example, he put example from business life. So as example, interpretivism, when are talking about one reality. So if you are talking about one business unit organization as example, and you measure the degree of customer satisfaction. So if you have a positivism approach and the one reality approach, so you expect that all the members will agree whether there's a customer satisfaction, a customer satisfied of them from the project or not, from the organization product or not, or from organization service or not. But in interpretivism, multiple reality, so you might get result from the managers, the employees inside the organization that we have good customer satisfaction, but from the perspective of the customer, they are not satisfied with the organization service. So you have a reality related to organization member, and another reality which related to customers. The customers has a different view than the view offered by, so you cannot know which one is real, is whether the view of the customer or the view of the, so you have different reality. This is what they call it, or mention it regarding the different realities. Pragmatism philosophy is related, if your research have no applicable in the life experience or something like that, you need to have research that can be applied. You just not doing the research just for research and debating some fancy papers or something like that. If it's not applicable, you don't do it. So some researchers are going for this philosophy, you just concentrate in the applicability of the research. So this pragmatism as example, when you or some organization hire some other consultant to do research about why the sales are going down, or why the moral of the employees they are losing more employees or something like that, the higher degree of absenteeism. So they expected the outcome of this research to apply it, to take it and apply it, and to improve the result based on it. So this is the pragmatism approach. You do the research only if it's applicable in the real life. Interpretivism, your philosophy that there's a different type of realities, different perspective from different parties. So that's why you use qualitative approach in interpretivism. Realism, we'll go through it. I think some part of realism is related to positivism and other is related closely to the interpretivism. So you somehow you are in the middle. Realism, you somehow good, maybe you when you start as example do qualitative research, and after that you formulate based on the result of the qualitative research, you formulate a questionnaire and you go for quantitative research. So realism, something in between. These are for the philosophies. Deductive and inductive, it's known when you formulate a new theories, or you follow an existing theory. Existing theory related deductive approach. New theory is related to inductive approach. The strategies you use after you decide your philosophy, decide whether to go for a new theory or to use existing theory, you need to formulate your strategy, whether to use experiment, survey, case study, action research, grounding theory, ethnography, or archival research. So if you, as example, decide to go for positivism philosophy and with deductive approach, so you're gonna use survey. So you cannot use
experiment
or experiment. survey or experiment, because you just value positivism and you want to go for deductive approach. So you use
Testing
survey
a
and
theory,
experiment.
so you will,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. You search for cause and effects and the one reality approach. If you go for, as example, interpretivism and inductive approach, you go for case study,
Case
for
study
action
or
research,
observation.
or for archival research, as example. Archival research, you cannot use it in inductive approach. You can use for case study or, as example, action research is related to what philosophy? Pragmatism. Because in a pragmatism philosophy, you want to make action, or you to apply the research. So you go for action research. You apply some modification inside the organization. You apply it. You propose it based on your research. You apply it, and then you monitor whether this action help in changing the situation or not. So this is for, if you might be asked, if you are a positivism and you go for inductive as example, which type of research strategy you gonna use? So this explain your understanding about the connection between the philosophies, the approach, and the strategies. Maybe they can formulate the questions based on that. The choices, whether it's used mono method, mixed method, or multi-method. And the time frame, whether it's cross-sectional or longitudinal time frame, with its wide time frame, or just concentrate in specific the time of doing the research. You are not studying long-term, long time frame. Yes, longitudinal research, that's the Hawthorne study. The Hawthorne study, they study the for long years, from 5 or 6 years, they continue to study the action. And the last things is to decide about technique and the procedure, about data collection and data analysis. So this is in a brief how you're gonna move from the outer layer of the onion to the inner layer of the onion. And he mentioned that sometimes researchers are missing some layers. You just go, as example, directly to data collection. This is not appropriate way of doing the research, or just decide on doing the survey before formulating a philosophical approach, or our strategy or something like that. You just decide to go for survey directly, and then they formulate the research based on that. You just want a topic that it's compatible with the survey. So this is some wrongdoing in doing the research. Most of the researchers are using. Here from Nargul Hoja book, the process of doing the research. It starts from exploration. So you start with the questions, what you are going to do, what you are going to research about, what's the problem in hand. So you formulate the question at the early stages, and then you try to investigate whether these questions are already solved by other researchers. So you do a literature review.
What are their contribution? If there is a gap, so that you can fill in the gap and contribute to it.
Yes. This is actually, this is about whether your question or your problem are not surveyed before, or not solved before by other researcher or not. And after doing the literature review, you can go for deciding which theory, whether you are going to for a new theory, or you're gonna utilize existing one. The research design, after this is the first step, asking the question, reviewing the literature, deciding about the theory. You go for the research design, whether it's you go for operationalization of the research question. What the meaning of operationalization of the research question is, when you have deciding with independent and dependent variables.
Yes, now you have the constructs, and the construct, they're abstract ideas. So in order, and they're not measurable. So and this is the process of making the constructs measurable variables. So converting them to measurable variables.
Yes, this is about the variabilization of your question. Set it in a variable and try to measure. After that, you try to measure the relation between these variables. Research method, decide on the research method, quantitative or qualitative, and you decide about the sample you are gonna utilize for your research. So after that, you formulate the research proposal. After you formulate the research proposal, you gonna go for research execution, do pilot testing in order to test whether really the variables you are presenting or the things you are gonna search is just take pilot before you go deep inside surveying all the sample. Data collection and data analysis, and then the research report. Finally, you formulate the research report. So this is the process: exploration, research design, and research execution. In exploration, you define research question, review the literature and theory. Research design, you operationalize your construct. You decide for research method, whether it's an inductive or deductive approach, and your sampling strategy. You formulate the proposal. Then you do the pilot testing and data collection and data analysis, and finally you go for research research report. This figure is about paradigm. So paradigm, I think I always mixed with its definition, but it's how you're gonna review the research report.
Yeah, how you view the phenomena that exists in the world, for example.
So if each researcher will review the phenomena in different prospects.
Differently. So, for example, positivism is one paradigm. Post-positivism is another paradigm. Interpretism, and everyone views the phenomena that exist in the world in a different way, and accordingly they that's how they for example, they obtain knowledge and they make some scientific tests.
So it's about your review, how you are viewing the phenomena you are going to study, and how you're gonna handle the study, or your vision or your review about that.
Yes.
So you might have a social order paradigm or a radical change, that the society you are working or you are studying have a social order, or it's in a radical change. So as example, if you are viewing or do research about real estate industry in Turkey as example, so you might view the real estate industry as have some order, some patterns, and not changing continuously. There is no change. But if you are viewing or researching about the IT companies as example and the latest technology, it's not stable. It's always changing. So you go for radical change. So this is your review about the society you are going to research, whether it's have order or it's have a change, radical change continuously. And after that, you need to decide whether your view is objectivism or subjectivism. Objectivism is also related that you have one reality and you go for just one reason for the problem, one view for the problem, or subjectivism, the existence of different reality. So objectivism, you tell the old word object from physics. So physics is governed by specific rules. 1 + 1 = 2. There is no other result for this question. But subjectivism, you based on subjective approach. You just hearing from there, and you interrupt their views, and you come up, maybe managers have some reality, middle managers have another reality, workers have other reality and another perspective about the problem. So this is the subjectivism. Objectivism is related to survey and the quantitative approach, and subjectivism is related to qualitative approach. And most of the research are in this field, whether to functionalism or interpretivism. Functionalism, it's when you have social order, but you have objectivist approach, and subjectivism with social order, interpretivism. Here, the radical structuralism and the radical humanism in the upper, and no one used this approach and seldom used by the researcher. So any comments from your side? What's your... So here's the research. It's an interactive, as the research process of the research is an interactive process of observation, rationalization, and then validation. So during the research process, you first observe, then rationalize, and then validate the result. So observation, you observe a natural or social plan that interests us. Then try to make sense of observed phenomena by logically connect the different pieces of the puzzle. So you start to observe something, and then you try to make sense of the observed phenomena and connect the different puzzles together. And then you validate, test a theory using scientific method, modifying or extending our theory. So you might test the theory, you might modify it, you might extend it. A process exploration, as we mentioned, which have literature question, literature review, and theory. Research design, operationalization, design a measure to measure your construct. In operationalization, you just define the construct, and you need to define the measure that you are going to use in order to measure this construct. المسطرة اللي هتشتغل عليها. Use a pre-validate measure, or you design a new measure in the operationalization phase. Whether your construct is measured by others or already have a measure, or you need to construct a new measure. The research method, whether to use quantitative or qualitative. Sampling strategy, individual or firm or individual within a group, you need to define your sampling strategy. Then you formulate research proposal, execute the research by doing pilot testing, help detect potential problem in your research. This is for pilot. Data collection, whether to go for a quantitative data collection or a qualitative data collection. Analysis, whether you go, if you select quantitative, then you go to quantitative data analysis, use regression and structural equation, or you do qualitative data analysis by coding or content analysis. Then you form the research report, and the common mistake in the research process is when you insufficiently motivate research question. You just do the research question as the first insufficiently or not motivated question. Or you follow just the norms, the tradition, the trend of the research, or you search for unsearchable problem. Or you just go for your favorite research method and approach, and just decide, in spite if it's related to the problem you are researching or not. Or you just collecting data without having any knowledge about the purpose.
Don't even have the topic in hand. You don't have an idea about the topic, and you just go and collect data. Yes, just collecting data blindly. This is the research process, and in a rush, I think maybe if they're gonna include it in the written exam, they are gonna ask us about the research process, maybe. So the topic of the research methodology, the research philosophy. Research philosophy, it refers to a system of beliefs and assumption about the development of knowledge. So how you gonna formulate your assumption, and of course each one has different type of philosophy to follow. Ontology, it's the nature of reality.
how we see the world. Does the world consist of social order? It's in a constant change. So your vision about reality or how you gonna see the world. It will identify how you're gonna go through the research. And here's some example for ontological assumption, like your vision or your perspective about the business world. Whether it's corrupted world, you might see that business world as corrupted, not good environment or something like that, governed by capitalist and unethical behavior and something like that. If your ontological assumption about the business world like this, so if you're gonna go for research in the business world, what the titles that you are gonna search for. You might search for scandals, the effect of unethical behavior, and topics like that match your ontological assumption about this society. So the nature of reality means that what your assumption, what your perception about this reality. Another person might say that business world are very essential, very important to the welfare of the society, and so on. So his research topic will be different than the other ones who saw the business world in different world, different reality.
So it's about your perspective and how you view.
I know about your perspective and how you view the society that you are going to search. It will help you or guide you to about identifying the topics that for your research. Epistemology, it's about how you're going to communicate the reality. You have perception, you have vision, you have thinking, assumption about the world. How you going to communicate this perception, their assumption to the others. So this is an epistemological point of view. Our assumption about the best way to study the world. What we should use to study reality, whether you use objective or subjective approach. So it's about your assumption about the best way to study the world. So your perception about the business world is very important for the society, and so on. So how you gonna communicate the reality, whether to do objective approach or do you do subjective approach? Related to knowledge and how you can transfer knowledge about reality. So connecting between ontological assumption and epistemological assumption. So ontological assumption, you see the word about, is it radically changed or stable? And epistemological, your objective approach, your are objective or subjective. This structure will be formulated based on your ontological and epistemological assumption about the reality. Radical change, social order, objectivism, subjectivism. This axis is related to epistemological assumption, and this axis ontological assumption. Yes. Based on that, you have 4 different paradigms. The first paradigm is functionalism, the existing of single reality. The researcher is emotionally detached from the topics. You don't involve your emotion inside the research.
So it's not subjective.
Not subjective, of course. The functionalism, you are talking about objectives and stable. So it's not subjective, just deal with numbers and surveys. There's no interpretation in this approach. Interpretivism, when you use interview, somehow the researcher, because you are interviewing others, so emotions play a significant role in this type of approach. You have emotionally attached interpretivism paradigm. Radical change and understand the change objectivism, it's radical structuralism. The world is radically changing, and objectivism, you go for radical structuralism paradigm. And if it's radically changed with subjective, you go for radical humanism. The book mentions that these types of approaches or paradigms does not used by researchers. So I think the important is here. So this is the epistemology,
In
ontology.
functionalism and interpretism.
Yes. The functionalism and interpretism paradigm is most important. So we have ontology. We defined ontology. We defined epistemology. About the axiology is the effect of norms and beliefs in your view about reality. So you introduce your norms, beliefs in your view about reality. So if you have one single reality, you're emotionally detached from the research, use a questionnaire and the quantitative approach. If you believe in multiple reality, you emotionally attach, use it for interview a structure and unstructure, intercept researcher feeling during the analysis. So you introduce your feelings or your norms or your values or whatever in the research. This is about the axiology, the interference or the effect of the researcher norms and beliefs in forming the reality at the end. So in axiology is irrelevant in objectivist approach. You do not include your norms or beliefs in it, but in subjectivist approach or subjectivist paradigm,
your beliefs will influence the analysis.
The final result, yes. Type of philosophies, as we explain it, we have positivism. I prefer to work with observable social reality, like generalization, like physical and natural science, pure data and facts, uninfluenced by human interpretation and bias. And he posted one can make reasonable inference about phenomena by combining empirical observation with logical reasoning. So post-positivism is when you make reasonable inference about phenomena by combining empirical observation with logical reasoning. This is post-positivism approach, which is introduced logical reasoning. After you combine the data and you come up with the data, you come with logical reasoning. So post-positivism introduced logical reasoning at the end. But here you are dealing with number and you're just dealing with one reality about pure data and fact. This is the positivism approach. Realism, naive objectivism, says that what you see is what you get. I told you realism is somehow related to positivism. So it's related to, you know, the assumption that, as example, if you see someone who welcoming others in very warm word comes, and so you're told this one is love this one. You don't seek or you don't search for other behavior. You just deal with what you see. So we are talking here about realism, somehow related to positivism, the existence of one reality based on what you are seeing, the hidden reality or
on the
I don't care about it. I just looking for what I'm seeing in front of me. Yes, this is the realism. The critical realism focus on explaining what you see and what we see and experience in terms of underlying structure of reality. So here in the realism, you just take care of what you see. Just what you see is influence your judgment about the reality. But in the critical realism, you are relying on what you see and your experience. Experience on interrupting what you are seeing. So from your experience, oh, this one is lying about his behavior, or you might construct it in another way. So you might investigate more about the actual reality, whether it's like what you see or the experience, and what you see, is it forming the same reality or different reality. Impose the existing of reality behind what you see or feeling. Realities are external and independent. Reality not directly accessible. So in objectivism and realism, you directly access the reality through observation or through questionnaires or dealing with numbers and facts. But here in the critical realism, you are they have the feeling that it's not directly accessible. You need to investigate more. You need to look in the background or something like that in order to reach the reality. When you see phenomena, what I don't see might be the reason behind this phenomena. So the interpretation of the explanation of the phenomena is not related about what you see only. Maybe some other reasons contribute in formulating this phenomena. And this is about the critical realism. I think it's also not reported. Interpretivism. Interpretivism, like critical realism, developed as a critique for positivism, but from a subjective perspective. A human different from physical phenomena because they create meaning. Interpretivism study this meaning. The purpose of interpretivism research is to create a new, richer understanding and interpretation of social world and context. The way they would argue, for example, that the ways in which the CEO, board director, manager, shop assistants, cleaners, and customers see and experience a large retail company. So, as the example I mentioned, the perspective or the vision about some company might be different if you are viewing the CEO or viewing the worker or viewing the managers or viewing the assistants or viewing the customers. Each one of them has different reality related to his own experience with the organization. This is for interpretivism, the existence of different reality. Postmodernism. Postmodernism philosophy emphasizes the role of language and of power relations, seeking to question accepted ways of thinking and give voice to alternative marginalized views. The goal of postmodernism research is therefore to radically challenge the established way of thinking and knowing, and to give voice and legitimacy to the superfist and marginalized ways of seeing and knowing that have been previously excluded. So postmodernism is about challenging the norms and acceptable knowledge. So this is only the postmodernism approach to challenging everything and establish new ways of thinking, radical ways of thinking or something like that. Pragmatism, as we mentioned earlier, practicality of the research. The research result must be followed with action. If the research results only kept in books or in the shelves with no actionable use for it, it's useless. So in a pragmatism philosophy, your research must be followed with action. So they emphasize the research that related to action. This is pragmatism, in short. So if you come up with some concept or some rules and you didn't follow it with action, it's not acceptable by pragmatism. Modernism, postmodernism, challenging the way of thinking. Interpretivism, we say it, the existing of different reality, critical realism based on what you see and what you observe, combined with your experience. Realism, it's only what you see, it's what you get. Positivism is observable social reality, like physical science or something like that. These are the different types of research philosophies. Paradigm, it's the way of examining social phenomena from which particular understanding can begin and explanation attends. So it's about, as you mentioned, there's a phenomena and how you're gonna deal with this phenomena is your paradigm. Concepts, it's generalized characteristics associated with object, event, or people. Objects are not concept, people, car, firm, not concept. So it's the characteristics of the object. So the car is not object, but as example, the year of production is an object. So it's related to the characteristics of the study object. So if you are talking about the firm by itself is not an object, Not the concept, sorry, the firm is not the concept. It's an object, but the characteristics of the firm, as operational efficiency, financial capabilities, these are the characteristics of the object. We can call it a concept. This is the definition of concept, a generalized characteristic associated with object, event, or people. So firm capacity innovation, consider a concept. The concept of distance can be used to indicate social separation. Some concepts in the research are taken from another field of science, like distance from physics, to explain the social separation. Gravitate from physics also, gravitate to other shopping place, borrowed from gravitational force of physics. So you might have some concepts that are borrowed from other science. Construct about the variables. So the concept, as we mentioned, it's the characteristics of an object. Construct might be formed of set of concepts. It might be simple, like person weight, or might be combined, multi-dimensional construct, like person communication skills. So this is simple, person weight, person height, this is person age. It's a simple construct. Or it might a multi-dimensional construct, like person communication skills. It's about person vocabulary, syntax, spelling. It's one construct, but has multi-dimensional. So in construct must be precise and the clear definitions that other can use to understand exactly what does it mean and what does not mean. So the construct in your research should be clear and understandable. The other can understand it. A clear measure, and you must have a clear measure for construct, like you have, as example, a construct is temperature. So you have a clear measure, whether it's is it in Fahrenheit or in Celsius. If your construct is a monthly income, you need to explain whether it's a monthly income or is your construct is the income. You need to explain whether it's a monthly or yearly. So you need to be very precise in defining your construct. The variables measures representation of abstract construct. Construct is not measurable, so you need to measure it using variable. As example, intelligence is a construct, and IQ test is a variable. So the bottom line here is that the variable used to measure the construct. The construct need a variable to measure it. This is the combination between them. Like the simplest example is intelligence.
Yes, you cannot measure intelligence. Are you talking about intelligence in terms of how hard they work, or are you talking about it in terms of IQ?
IQ.
Measuring IQ, it's something measurable that you can measure it. It's not an abstract idea. So it simplifies it, makes it easier to measure.
And in the variables, as you know, we have independent variable, the variables that explain other variable, and dependent variable, variable that explained by other variable. And we have mediating variable. As example, when you measure intelligence, intelligence is independent variable. Effort, moderating variable. So your academic achievement, mediating variable. Earning potential, dependent variable. So you might formulate a research to find the causal effect between intelligence and earning potential. So intelligence and earning potential might be linked together, but in order to study them, you introduce other variables, like how you might be intelligent, but you didn't exert so much effort. So you introduce effort as a moderating variable. And you might be intelligent and exert effort, but you don't have academic achievement. So you also introduce academic achievement as mediating variable. So it's like you have independent, dependent, and some variables in the middle to really study the effect of intelligence on the earning potential.
Mhm.
So the construct, it's a set of concepts. As we mentioned, concept is the characteristics of the object, not the car is not, it's not a concept, it's an object, but the mileage of the car, the years of the power of the car might be a concept. And the construct is a set of concepts. Construct might be simple, like person weight, or multidimensional, like person communication skills has different different dimensions. The construct must be clear about how you can measure it, like income, you need to have it in monthly or yearly. The variable used to measure the construct, like intelligence is a construct, but IQ is used to measure it. You have dependent variable, you have independent variable, you have mediating variable and moderating variable. So a process of measuring the construct, you need to have a good conceptualization of your construct. You build image about your construct. What exactly does it mean? Whether your construct is unified, unity or multi-dimension, unidimension or multi-dimension, have one dimension or several dimension. And you need to operationalize your construct. You need to have some way of measuring or develop a measure, whether the measure is exist or you need to develop a new measure to measure your construct. I think they can put it in a very simpler way. They use very long way to explain it.
Mhm.
Proposition, it's a tentative and conjectural relationship between construct that is stated in declarative form. It shows how the theoretical constructs such as intelligence, effort, academic achievement and earning potential are related to each other. So when you set a proposition, it's about the relation between the different construct and variables inside your organization you are going to study. The proposition, the link, and the relation between the different construct in your study.
Mhm. Then when it's operationalized, it becomes a hypothesis, and it explains the relationship between the variables, independent and dependent variables.
Yes, of course. Once you explain the relation between the different constructs, including in your research, you set a proposition. You can call it a proposition. Approach to theory development. The theory.
After this, can we stop after this? Before we go to reliability and validity and those things.
Okay, I think theory is just the definition, not important. Methodological choices, quantitative and qualitative.
We already spoke about this.
Research methodology, inductive, deductive, abductive, it's easy. Research strategy, it's whether experimental research or survey, case study, action research, grounded theory, archival research. Action research is make the assumption in action, study the effect of action on the subject under consideration. So you develop an action and you study the consequences or the action. Archival research, you go to the library and scan the archive data. Sample selection, whether to have a probability sampling or non-probability sampling. This is also easy. Time horizon, we talked about it. Techniques and the procedure, data collection and data analysis. Data collection, whether using questionnaire or interview. The interview, whether it's structure, unstructured, or semi-structured. And data analysis, whether to follow the qualitative data or quantitative data. Validity and reliability. This both topics we can complete it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And tomorrow we can review the the possible
Or
questions,
live.
Q&A
Yeah.
of
Okay.
the expected question for the exam, hopefully.
Okay.
Okay.
Tamam.
So tomorrow for research reliability and validity, maybe okay. Maybe we can go for the question and respond this later, because I don't think it will be including in the written exam. Maybe we can
The
make
what?
another. The research methodology won't be included in the
The written.
written exam.
I